In a quiet corner of the English countryside, surrounded by lush green hills and ancient trees, stood a small laboratory that few people knew about. It wasn't flashy or modern like the high-tech facilities you see in movies. Instead, it was an old stone building with ivy creeping up its walls, almost blending into the landscape as if nature itself wanted to keep it hidden. Inside this unassuming place, a group of scientists worked tirelessly on projects most would consider strange, or even impossible. But these weren't ordinary scientists chasing fame or fortune. They were driven by one thing: curiosity. For years, humanity has been fascinated by the mysteries of life and death. Philosophers, poets, and scholars have spent centuries trying to understand what happens after we take our last breath. Is there an afterlife? Do spirits linger? Or is death simply the end, a permanent silence where nothing exists anymore? These questions haunted not just philosophers but also everyday people who had lost loved ones. And now, this team of researchers decided to tackle those age-old questions using tools no one else had dared to try: a hidden camera placed inside a coffin. The idea first came to Dr. Emily Carter, the lead scientist of the group, during a late-night conversation with her colleagues. They were discussing ancient burial rituals when someone mentioned how some cultures believed the soul stayed near the body for days after death. What if, Dr. Carter mused aloud, we could find out for sure? What if we could see what really happens inside a grave? At first, everyone laughed nervously. The thought seemed absurd, almost disrespectful. Yet, as the hours passed, the idea began to take root in their minds. Could technology finally provide answers to questions that had baffled humanity for millennia? But before they could move forward, they needed permission, and not just from ethics boards or funding agencies. They needed someone willing to let their final resting place become part of such an unusual experiment. That's when John Harper entered the picture. John was a kind man in his late 60s, battling terminal cancer with grace and courage. He had heard about the lab's work through a mutual acquaintance and reached out to them himself. "I've lived a good life," he told Dr. Carter during their first meeting. "If my passing can help others understand something bigger than ourselves, then I'm happy to do it." John's willingness to participate gave the team hope, but it also weighed heavily on them. This wasn't just another research project. It was deeply personal. Every decision they made felt monumental because they weren't dealing with abstract concepts anymore. They were working with real emotions, real lives. Preparing the equipment became both a technical challenge and an emotional journey. The camera they chose was small yet powerful, designed to capture clear images even in complete darkness. It was equipped with motion sensors and microphones sensitive enough to pick up the faintest sounds. Batteries capable of lasting weeks were installed, ensuring they wouldn't miss anything critical. As the day of the burial approached, the atmosphere in the lab grew tense. Some members of the team questioned whether they were crossing ethical boundaries. Others worried about what they might discover. What if they found evidence of something beyond human understanding? Would they be prepared to handle it? Despite their doubts, preparations continued. The coffin was carefully outfitted with the camera system, concealed so well that no one looking at it would suspect anything unusual. Everything had to be perfect. This was, after all, John's final wish. On the morning of the burial, the team gathered outside the cemetery gates, their faces pale under gray skies. Rain drizzled softly, soaking the ground and adding to the somber mood. As John's coffin was carried toward the gravesite, Dr. Carter couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. This wasn't just science anymore. It was deeply human. She glanced at her colleagues, each lost in their own thoughts, and wondered if any of them truly understood what they were about to witness. Back at the lab, monitors flickered to life as the live feed from the camera started streaming. For the first few moments, all they saw was darkness. Then slowly, details emerged. The smooth wooden surface of the coffin lid, the faint outline of screws holding everything together. It was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of static from the audio feed. Everyone leaned closer, eyes glued to the screens, waiting for something, anything. Doubts crept in again. Had they wasted months planning something that would yield nothing but empty footage? Yet beneath the surface, excitement simmered. This was uncharted territory, a venture into the unknown. No matter what happened next, they were making history. Whether they proved or disproved theories about life after death, their work would spark conversations around the world. And maybe, just maybe, they'd catch a glimpse of something extraordinary. Something that could change everything we know about existence itself. With bated breath, they watched as the soil began to cover the coffin, sealing it away from the living world above. Now only time would tell what secrets lay buried alongside John Harper. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, a profound stillness settled over the cemetery. The rain had stopped, leaving behind damp earth and a faint mist that clung to the air like a ghostly veil. John Harper's family stood nearby, their faces etched with grief, unaware of the extraordinary experiment unfolding beneath their feet. They said their final goodbyes, their voices trembling as they spoke of love, memories, and the hope that John had found peace. For them, this was an ending, a chance to lay their loved one to rest and begin the long process of healing. But for the scientists watching from afar, it was only the beginning. Back at the makeshift command center, a modest room filled with computers, monitors, and tangled wires, the team huddled around the screens, their eyes fixed on the live footage, streaming from inside the coffin. At first, there was nothing unusual to see. Just darkness. The camera captured the smooth wooden surface of the coffin lid above and the faint outlines of its edges. Occasionally, a speck of dust or a droplet of condensation would catch the light, but otherwise, the image remained static. The audio feed was equally uneventful, picking up only muffled sounds as the soil was shoveled over the casket. It was quiet, too quiet, and that silence pressed down on the team like a weight. Dr. Emily Carter sat closest to the monitor, her fingers tapping nervously against the desk. She had spent countless nights preparing for this moment, imagining all the possibilities. What if they saw something incredible? What if they didn't see anything at all? The uncertainty gnawed at her, even as she tried to remain calm for her team. Patience, she reminded herself silently. Science wasn't about instant gratification. It was about observation, patience, and persistence. Still, the waiting was excruciating. Hours passed and the initial excitement began to wane. Some members of the team started fidgeting in their chairs while others whispered among themselves, speculating about what might happen next, or whether anything would happen at all. A young researcher named Alex broke the monotony by suggesting they grab coffee. "Maybe caffeine will help us stay sharp," he joked weakly, though no one laughed. Dr. Carter shook her head firmly. "We can't afford to miss a single second," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "If something does occur, we need to document it immediately." Night fell quickly, cloaking the countryside in shadows. Outside, crickets chirped, and the distant hoot of an owl echoed through the trees. Inside the command center, however, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. The team continued to stare at the screen, their exhaustion battling their determination. Then, just as some were beginning to nod off, something strange happened. One of the motion sensors attached to the coffin registered activity, a faint vibration, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. The team froze, their tired eyes snapping back to the monitor. Was it a glitch? Or was something actually moving inside the grave? At first, it seemed like nothing more than a trick of the mind. The camera's lens remained focused on the same dark expanse, showing no visible changes. But then the vibrations grew slightly stronger, accompanied by a low, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. The noise was soft, barely audible over the hum of the equipment, but it sent chills running down everyone's spines. "Did you hear that?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. No one answered. They were too busy straining to listen, trying to determine whether the sound was real or imagined. The tapping persisted, irregular yet deliberate, as though Something, or someone, was knocking on the walls of the coffin. Panic bubbled just beneath the surface, but the scientists forced themselves to stay rational. It could be soil settling, one of them suggested hesitantly. Or maybe roots shifting underground. It was a plausible explanation, but deep down, none of them truly believed it. Roots didn't tap rhythmically. Soil didn't move with such precision. Whatever was causing the sound, it felt intentional. To rule out equipment malfunctions, Dr. Carter ordered a thorough check of the system. Every wire was inspected, every connection tested. Everything appeared to be functioning perfectly. The camera was working fine, the audio feed was clear, and the motion sensors showed consistent readings. There was no technical error to explain what they were witnessing. As the hours dragged on, the tapping continued intermittently, sometimes fading into silence, only to return moments later. Each time it resumed, the team leaned closer to the screen, their hearts pounding in unison. By midnight, the situation had grown surreal. The tapping wasn't the only anomaly anymore. Shadows began to appear on the camera feed, not solid shapes but fleeting glimpses of movement, like ripples in water. They danced along the edges of the frame, too fast to capture clearly but impossible to ignore. Some of the researchers argued that these shadows were likely caused by moisture condensing on the lens, refracting the dim light in unpredictable ways. Others weren't so sure. "Look at how they move," Alex murmured, pointing to the screen. "They're not random. It's almost like they're alive." The debate grew heated, with voices rising in frustration and disbelief. Dr. Carter raised her hand, silencing the room. "Let's not jump to conclusions," she said firmly. "We need to analyze the data objectively before we start speculating." Her words brought a semblance of order back to the chaos, but the unease lingered. Even she couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that defied logic and reason. As dawn approached, the tapping finally ceased, leaving behind an eerie silence. The shadows disappeared as well, retreating into the darkness as if they had never existed. Exhausted but unable to tear themselves away from the monitors, the team reviewed the footage again and again, searching for patterns or explanations. Nothing added up. The evidence pointed to phenomena that couldn't be easily dismissed as natural occurrences. Yet, without concrete answers, the mystery only deepened. For the first time since the project began, doubt crept into their minds. Had they made a mistake by pursuing this experiment? Were they tampering with forces they didn't understand? Despite their scientific training, fear began to take hold, a primal, instinctive reaction to the unknown. And yet, amidst the uncertainty, a spark of curiosity remained. If they were seeing something beyond the realm of human understanding, then perhaps they were closer to unraveling one of life's greatest mysteries than anyone had ever been before. But as the sun rose over the hills, casting golden light across the landscape, the team knew one thing for certain. Whatever awaited them in the days ahead, it would challenge everything they thought they knew about life, death, and what lies beyond. By the second day of the experiment, the atmosphere in the command center had shifted dramatically. What had started as a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation had now evolved into something far more intense, a blend of fascination, unease, and an unshakable sense of being on the brink of something extraordinary. The team barely slept, their minds too consumed by what they were witnessing, or thought they were witnessing, to even consider rest. Every beep from the motion sensors, every flicker on the camera feed, felt like a clue to a puzzle that was both thrilling and terrifying. As the morning light filtered through the windows of the lab, Dr. Emily Carter called for a quick meeting. "We need to stay focused," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Whatever we're seeing, whether it's natural or something else, we have a responsibility to document it accurately. No jumping to conclusions, no wild theories, just facts." Her words were meant to ground the team, but beneath her composed exterior, she was grappling with her own emotions. The events of the previous night, the rhythmic tapping, the fleeting shadows, had left her unsettled in ways she couldn't fully articulate. She reminded herself that science thrived on evidence, not speculation. But deep down she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that they were venturing into territory where logic might not apply. The first few hours of the day passed uneventfully. The footage from inside the coffin showed nothing out of the ordinary, just the same dark, still interior that had greeted them since the burial. The audio feed was silent except for the occasional creak of settling soil. For a brief moment, some members of the team allowed themselves to hope that the anomalies from the previous night had been isolated incidents, perhaps caused by environmental factors or equipment quirks. Maybe the worst of their worries was over. But then, just after noon, something new appeared on the screen. At first, it was so subtle that it almost went unnoticed. A faint glow, barely perceptible, hovering near the edge of the camera's field of vision. It wasn't bright enough to illuminate the coffin's interior, but it was unmistakably there, pulsating gently like a tiny heartbeat. Alex, who had been monitoring the feed at the time, leaned closer to the monitor, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Is that light?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. The rest of the team quickly gathered around, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. They watched as the glowing orb drifted lazily across the frame, its movement slow and deliberate. It didn't behave like any natural phenomenon they'd ever encountered. Fireflies didn't exist in this part of England, and bioluminescent organisms wouldn't survive underground. Could it be a reflection? A trick of moisture on the lens? They ran diagnostics on the camera system, checking for malfunctions or interference, but everything checked out. The light was real, or at least it appeared to be. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, another orb materialized, followed by a third. Soon, several glowing shapes were floating lazily within the confines of the coffin, their soft luminescence casting eerie shadows on the wooden walls. Some of the orbs moved independently, while others seemed to orbit each other in lazy spirals. The sight was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, but it also carried an undercurrent of dread. These weren't random occurrences. They seemed purposeful, as though guided by some unseen force. Could these be gases escaping from the body? One researcher suggested hesitantly. Decomposition did produce gases after all, and certain chemical reactions could theoretically create light. But Dr. Carter shook her head. "Not like this," she replied. "These movements are too coordinated, too deliberate. Gases don't behave this way." The debate grew heated as the team tried to rationalize what they were seeing. Some clung to scientific explanations, searching for any loophole that might explain the orbs without straying into the supernatural. Others, however, began to entertain the possibility that they were witnessing something beyond the realm of human understanding. What if... Alex started, then hesitated, unsure how to phrase his thoughts. What if these lights are spirits, or energy left behind after death? His suggestion hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. No one laughed or dismissed it, outright, which spoke volumes about how far their perspectives had shifted in such a short time. Even Dr. Carter, who prided herself on her commitment to empirical evidence, found herself unable to dismiss the idea entirely. After all, wasn't that why they had embarked on this project in the first place? To explore the unknown? As the afternoon wore on, the orbs continued their dance, occasionally vanishing only to reappear moments later in a different part of the frame. Then, just as the team was beginning to adjust to their presence, something even stranger occurred. One of the orbs stopped moving abruptly and hovered directly in front of the camera lens. For a split second, it seemed to pulse brighter, its glow intensifying until it nearly blinded the sensor. When the light dimmed again, the orb was gone. But something else had taken its place. On the screen, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was indistinct at first, little more than a vague outline against the backdrop of the coffin's wooden walls. But as the seconds ticked by, the shape grew clearer. It was humanoid, with elongated limbs and a hazy, translucent form. The figure didn't move like a living person. Instead, it floated silently, its posture upright yet oddly weightless. Its features were obscured, blending into the shadows, but there was no mistaking the impression of a face staring directly into the camera. The room fell utterly silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the collective intake of breath as the team processed what they were seeing. Was this real? Or was it some elaborate optical illusion created by the interplay of light, shadow, and imagination? Dr. Carter reached for the playback controls, rewinding the footage to examine the figure frame by frame. Each still image confirmed what they already suspected. The figure was undeniably there, captured in undeniable detail. For a long moment, no one dared to speculate about what or who they were looking at. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "Do you think," he began, swallowing hard, "do you think it's John?" The question sent a shiver through the room. John Harper had been buried 2 days ago, his body sealed inside the coffin alongside the hidden camera. If the figure truly resembled a human form, could it somehow be connected to him? Was this evidence of consciousness lingering after death, or merely a projection of their own hopes and fears? Dr. Carter took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain objective. "We can't jump to conclusions," she said, though her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "This could be anything, an anomaly, a trick of perception, or something we haven't accounted for. We need to analyze the data carefully before we draw any conclusions." Despite her cautionary words, the mood in the room had changed irrevocably. The initial skepticism that had characterized the project was giving way to a growing sense of awe and fear. Whatever they were witnessing, it defied explanation. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the countryside into darkness, once again, the team knew they were only scratching the surface of a mystery far greater than they had anticipated. As they settled in for another long night of observation, one thing became abundantly clear: the line between life and death was far blurrier than anyone had imagined. And whatever secrets lay buried in that grave, they were determined to uncover them, even if it meant confronting truths that challenged everything they believed about existence itself. By the third night of the experiment, the team was operating on a mix of adrenaline, caffeine, and sheer determination. Sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by an unrelenting drive to understand what they were witnessing. The events of the previous days, the glowing orbs, the shadowy figure, had left them teetering on the edge of disbelief and wonder. Each new discovery seemed to pull them further into a world that defied logic, where science and the supernatural collided in ways no one could have predicted. The hours dragged on, marked only by the faint hum of equipment and the occasional rustle as someone adjusted their position in their chair. Outside, the countryside lay cloaked in darkness, silent except for the distant call of an owl or the whisper of wind through the trees. Inside the command center, however, tension crackled, like static electricity. Every flicker on the screen, every sound from the audio feed carried the weight of possibility. They were no longer just researchers observing data. They were explorers navigating uncharted territory, unsure of what awaited them around the next corner. Around midnight, the camera captured something that would haunt the team for the rest of their lives. At first it was subtle, a faint shimmer near the coffin's lid, almost indistinguishable from the play of shadows cast by the dim ambient light. But then, slowly, the shimmer coalesced into a shape. It wasn't one of the glowing orbs they had seen before. This was different, larger, more defined. And as it materialized fully, the room fell deathly silent. The figure appeared humanoid but otherworldly, its form translucent and wavering, as though viewed through rippling water. Its features were indistinct, blurred at the edges, yet there was an undeniable resemblance to John Harper. The posture, the outline of the shoulders, even the vague suggestion of a face, it all bore an uncanny likeness to the man whose body lay sealed inside the coffin. For several heart-stopping moments, the figure simply hovered there, motionless as if studying the camera, or perhaps the people watching through it. Then, without warning, it moved, not with the jerky, erratic motions of gas bubbles rising, or light refracting off moisture, but with deliberate grace. It drifted closer to the lens, its movements fluid and unhurried. The team leaned forward collectively, their breaths held, as if any sound might startle it away. When the figure reached the edge of the frame, it paused again, tilting its head slightly as though listening or waiting. Dr. Emily Carter felt her pulse quicken. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with everything she knew about physics, biology, and human consciousness. Was this some kind of residual energy left behind after death? A projection of John's spirit? Or was it merely their minds playing tricks, conjuring patterns and meaning out of chaos? She glanced at her colleagues, searching their faces for answers, but found only mirrored expressions of awe and confusion. "Rewind it," Alex whispered hoarsely, breaking the silence. "Let's see it again." Dr. Carter complied, rewinding the footage and playing it back frame by frame. With each replay, the figure became more tangible, more real. There was no denying its presence now. It wasn't a glitch, it wasn't an illusion. It was there, captured in stark detail, defying every explanation they had relied on until that moment. As the playback looped, another researcher named Priya spoke up, her voice trembling. Could this be him? Could this be John? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered. No one wanted to entertain the idea too openly, fearing ridicule or worse, the possibility that they were losing their grip on reality. Yet deep down the thought lingered. John Harper had willingly participated in this experiment, knowing his final resting place would become a window into the unknown. Had he somehow returned to deliver a message? Or was this merely a fragment of his essence, lingering in the space between life and death? Before anyone could respond, the figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. One moment it was there, suspended in the frame, and the next it was gone, leaving behind only darkness. The abruptness of its departure sent a ripple of unease through the room. What did it mean? Had it finished whatever purpose brought it there? Or had it retreated because it sensed it was being watched? The team sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Some scribbled notes furiously, attempting to document every detail while it was still fresh in their minds. Others stared blankly at the screen, their thoughts spiraling into realms they hadn't dared to explore before. Dr. Carter finally broke the quiet, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This changes everything," she said softly. "If we're seeing what I think we're seeing, then we've stumbled onto something far bigger than ourselves." Her words resonated deeply, echoing the collective sentiment of the group. This wasn't just about proving or disproving theories anymore. It was about confronting fundamental questions about existence, identity, and what, if anything, lay beyond the veil of mortality. The implications were staggering, not just for science but for humanity as a whole. Over the next few hours, the team debated fiercely, their exhaustion giving way to bursts of intellectual fervor. Some argued that the figure must have a rational explanation, citing electromagnetic interference, psychological biases, or even hallucinations brought on by stress and lack of sleep. Others pointed to the mounting evidence, the rhythmic tapping, the glowing orbs, the shadowy apparition, as proof of something beyond the natural world. "What if death isn't an end?" Alex ventured hesitantly. "What if it's a transition, a doorway to somewhere else?" The idea sent shivers down everyone's spines. It was both exhilarating and terrifying to consider. If death truly opened the door to another realm, then humanity's understanding of life would need to be rewritten entirely. But such a revelation came with profound ethical and philosophical dilemmas. How could they share this knowledge responsibly? Would people embrace it as a source of hope, or would it ignite fear and chaos? As dawn approached, the discussion shifted toward practical concerns. Whatever they had recorded, it was irrefutable evidence, at least to those who chose to believe. The question now was what to do with it. Should they publish their findings immediately, risking public backlash and scrutiny, or should they keep the footage private, analyzing it further before deciding how to proceed? Dr. Carter advocated for caution. "We owe it to John and to ourselves to handle this carefully," she said. "If we rush to conclusions or release incomplete data, we risk undermining everything we've worked for." Her reasoning struck a chord with the team. They agreed to review the footage meticulously, cross-referencing every anomaly with known scientific principles, and consulting experts in fields ranging from quantum physics to parapsychology. Only then would they determine the best course of action. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection, each grappling with the enormity of what they had uncovered. As sunlight filtered through the windows, casting golden streaks across the cluttered lab, the team realized they were standing on the precipice of discovery. Whether they liked it or not, they had glimpsed something extraordinary, something that challenged the boundaries of human understanding. And as they prepared to face the challenges ahead, one truth remained clear. The mysteries of life and death were far more complex and far more beautiful than anyone had ever imagined. The news of the Coffin experiment leaked faster than anyone could have anticipated. In an age where information traveled at lightning speed, it was inevitable that whispers of their work would escape the confines of the small laboratory and reach the wider world. At first, it started as vague rumors, whispers among academics and paranormal enthusiasts who had caught wind of something extraordinary happening in the English countryside. But soon, those whispers grew louder, amplified by social media posts, blog articles, and speculative headlines. Within days, the story exploded into public consciousness, sparking debates that spanned continents, cultures, and belief systems. For Dr. Emily Carter and her team, the sudden attention was overwhelming. One moment, they were quietly analyzing footage in their secluded lab. The next, reporters were camped outside their door, microphones thrust toward them, demanding answers to questions they weren't ready to address. The frenzy was unlike anything they had ever experienced. News outlets ran sensationalized stories with titles like "Scientists Claim Proof of Life After Death" and "Footage from Beyond the Grave Sparks Global Debate." Overnight, what had begun as a private scientific endeavor became a global phenomenon. Public reaction was as polarized as it was passionate. On one side were those who embraced the findings with fervent enthusiasm. Religious leaders and spiritual communities hailed the footage as undeniable evidence of the soul's survival after death. For many believers, this was validation, a tangible affirmation of faith that transcended centuries of doubt and skepticism. Churches, temples, and mosques around the world held special services to celebrate the discovery, framing it as proof of divine design and eternal life. "This is not just science," one pastor declared during a televised sermon. "This is God speaking to us through the lens of human curiosity." On the other side of the spectrum were skeptics, scientists, philosophers, and critics who dismissed the footage as pseudoscience or outright fraud. They pointed to potential flaws in the experiment's methodology, questioning everything from the camera's reliability to the possibility of tampering. Some accused the team of fabricating evidence for fame or funding, while others argued that the anomalies captured on film could be explained by natural phenomena such as electromagnetic interference, decomposition gases, or even psychological bias. A prominent physicist went so far as to publish an op-ed titled "Why We Shouldn't Believe Everything We See," warning against jumping to supernatural conclusions without rigorous peer review. Caught in the crossfire, the research team found themselves under immense pressure. Each member grappled with the weight of public scrutiny in their own way. Alex, the youngest researcher, struggled with imposter syndrome, constantly second-guessing whether he was qualified to contribute to such a monumental discussion. Priya, usually calm and analytical, grew defensive when confronted by online trolls accusing her of perpetuating superstition. Even Dr. Carter, who prided herself on her ability to remain composed, felt the strain of leadership crumbling under the weight of conflicting opinions. Amidst the chaos, ethical dilemmas loomed large. Should they release the raw footage publicly, allowing people to draw their own conclusions? Or should they withhold it until they could provide a comprehensive analysis, risking accusations of secrecy or manipulation? The decision weighed heavily on Dr. Carter, who knew that whichever path they chose would have lasting consequences. She convened an emergency meeting with her team, seeking consensus. "We owe it to John Harper," she reminded them, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling around them. "He trusted us to honor his wishes and pursue truth, not spectacle. Whatever we do, we must stay true to that." After hours of heated debate, they reached a compromise. They would release edited clips of the footage, accompanied by detailed explanations of their methods and findings. Transparency, they agreed, was crucial, but so was responsibility. Alongside the video, they published a statement urging viewers to approach the material with open minds and critical thinking. "This is not definitive proof of anything," Dr. Carter wrote in the accompanying article. "It is a piece of a much larger puzzle, one that invites further exploration and dialogue." The release of the footage only intensified the storm. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, ranging from awestruck admiration to scathing criticism. Memes mocking the experiment spread like wildfire, with captions like "Boo, I'm a ghost," overlaying screenshots of the shadowy figure. Meanwhile, support groups for bereaved families emerged, finding solace in the idea that their loved ones might still exist in some form. Online forums dedicated to paranormal research dissected every frame of the video, searching for hidden clues or overlooked details. It seemed everyone had an opinion, and no two opinions were alike. Religious institutions also played a significant role in shaping public perception. While some embraced the findings as divine confirmation, others condemned the experiment as sacrilegious. A group of conservative clergy issued a joint statement denouncing the project, arguing that tampering with the sanctity of death violated sacred principles. "Death is not a mystery to be solved, but a sacred passage ordained by God," they wrote. "To meddle with it is to challenge His will." Their words resonated deeply with certain communities, igniting protests outside the lab and calls for the researchers to abandon their work entirely. Despite the backlash, there were moments of unexpected beauty amid the controversy. Letters poured in from individuals sharing personal stories of loss and hope. One woman wrote about how the footage gave her comfort after losing her son to cancer, imagining him existing peacefully in another realm. Another man described feeling inspired to reconnect with his estranged father, believing that reconciliation mattered more than ever if there truly was life beyond death. These heartfelt messages reminded the team why they had embarked on this journey in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but to explore the mysteries that unite humanity in wonder and grief. As weeks turned into months, the initial frenzy began to settle, though the conversation never fully faded. Documentaries were produced, podcasts launched, and academic papers written, each offering new perspectives on the experiment. Some focused on its implications for science and philosophy, while others explored its cultural and emotional impact. Schools incorporated the case study into lessons on ethics, technology, and the unknown, encouraging students to think critically about the boundaries of human knowledge. For Dr. Carter and her team, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. But nothing would ever be the same again. The experience had transformed them, forcing them to confront not only the mysteries of existence but also their own beliefs, fears, and vulnerabilities. They remained committed to continuing their work, driven by the conviction that understanding the unknown required courage, humility, and collaboration. Whether their findings ultimately proved groundbreaking or inconclusive, one thing was certain. They had sparked a global conversation that transcended disciplines, ideologies, and borders. And as the world continued to debate, question, and reflect, the camera remained buried beneath the earth, its lens forever trained on the darkness within the coffin. Somewhere in that void lay answers, or perhaps only more questions. Either way, humanity had taken one step closer to unraveling the enigma of life, death, and whatever lay beyond. Months had passed since the experiment first captured the world's attention, and yet its legacy continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. The debate over what had been recorded inside John Harper's coffin showed no signs of fading. If anything, it grew more complex as time went on, branching into countless directions: scientific, philosophical, spiritual, and emotional. For Dr. Emily Carter and her team, the aftermath was both a triumph and a burden. They had achieved what they set out to do, push the boundaries of human understanding. But in doing so, they had opened a Pandora's box of questions that humanity wasn't fully prepared to answer. The initial wave of media attention had subsided, But the footage remained a cultural touchstone, referenced in everything from late-night talk shows to academic conferences. Skeptics still dismissed it as pseudoscience, pointing to gaps in methodology or potential technological errors. Yet, even among the skeptics, there was an undercurrent of unease, a tacit acknowledgement that something about the footage defied easy explanation. Meanwhile, believers clung to it as proof of life after death, citing it as evidence of the soul's persistence beyond the physical body. Spiritual leaders incorporated it into sermons, while paranormal investigators analyzed every pixel for hidden meanings. The footage became a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest hopes, fears, and uncertainties. For the scientists involved, the personal toll of the experiment lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Dr. Carter found herself increasingly isolated within the scientific community. Colleagues who once respected her work now distanced themselves, wary of being associated with something so controversial. Invitations to speak at conferences dwindled, replaced by polite rejections or outright silence. Funding for future projects dried up as institutions hesitated to back research deemed too risky or unconventional. Despite these setbacks, Dr. Carter refused to abandon her pursuit of truth. She believed wholeheartedly in the importance of asking difficult questions, even if the answers challenged long-held beliefs. Inside the lab, the atmosphere had shifted. What had once been a tight-knit team united by curiosity and purpose now felt fractured. Some members, like Alex, struggled to reconcile their scientific training with the unexplainable phenomena they had witnessed. Others, like Priya, became vocal advocates for sharing their findings more widely, convinced that withholding information only fueled skepticism and fear. Arguments erupted frequently, each side passionately defending their perspective. Yet beneath the disagreements lay a shared sense of awe, a recognition that they had stumbled upon something extraordinary, even if they couldn't agree on what it meant. As the months wore on, Dr. Carter began to notice subtle changes in herself. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, but it also deepened her resolve. She spent hours poring over the footage, searching for patterns or insights she might have missed before. Each viewing revealed new details: the faint shimmer of light around the shadowy figure, the way the glowing orbs seemed to pulse in rhythm with one another. These observations weren't enough to provide definitive answers, but they hinted at a complexity far greater than anyone had anticipated. It was as though the camera hadn't just captured images. It had glimpsed fragments of a language written in light and shadow waiting to be deciphered. Outside the lab, the experiment's impact extended far beyond the scientific community. Families grappling with loss found solace in the possibility that their loved ones weren't truly gone. Support groups formed online and offline, connecting people through shared experiences of grief and hope. One woman wrote to Dr. Carter, thanking her for giving her the courage to visit her mother's grave again. "I used to feel like I was saying goodbye forever," she explained. "But now, when I stand there, I imagine her spirit hovering nearby, watching over me. It helps me feel closer to her." At the same time, the experiment sparked fierce debates about ethics and morality. Should science delve into realms traditionally reserved for religion and spirituality? Did humanity have the right to probe the mysteries of death, or was some knowledge better left untouched? These questions divided not only the public but also the researchers themselves. During one particularly heated discussion, Alex voiced his growing doubts aloud. "What if we've crossed a line?" he asked. "What if we're tampering with forces we don't understand and can't control?" Dr. Carter didn't have an easy answer. She knew the risks inherent in their work, but she also believed that curiosity was a fundamental part of being human. "We didn't create these mysteries," she reminded him gently. "They've always existed. All we've done is shine a light on them. Whether we like it or not, the questions are already here. Ignoring them won't make them go away." Despite the challenges, the team made strides in analyzing the data. They collaborated with experts in fields ranging from quantum mechanics to psychology, seeking fresh perspectives on the anomalies they had observed. Some suggested that the glowing orbs might represent energy released during decomposition, transformed into visible light by unknown processes. Others propose that the shadowy figure could be a form of consciousness projected beyond the physical body, an echo of John Harper's essence lingering in the space where his body lay. While none of these theories provided conclusive answers, they offered tantalizing possibilities, fueling further exploration. As the year drew to a close, the team decided to publish a comprehensive report detailing their findings. It included raw footage, annotated analyses, and reflections on the ethical implications of their work. They titled it, "Thresholds of Understanding: Exploring Life, Death, and Beyond." In the introduction, Dr. Carter wrote candidly about the journey they had undertaken, not as heroes uncovering definitive truths, but as humble seekers navigating the vast unknown. "We may never fully understand what lies beyond the veil," she concluded. But perhaps that's the point. To ask the question is to embrace the wonder of existence itself. The publication reignited public interest, sparking renewed discussions across disciplines. Schools incorporated the report into curricula, encouraging students to think critically about the intersection of science, ethics, and belief. Artists drew inspiration from the imagery, creating paintings, sculptures, and films that explored themes of mortality and transcendence. Even skeptics acknowledged the value of the project, recognizing it as a catalyst for dialogue about humanity's place in the universe. For Dr. Carter, the experiment marked both an ending and a beginning. John Harper's coffin remained buried, its secrets sealed beneath layers of earth. Yet the questions it raised continued to resonate, inspiring others to seek their own answers. Late one evening, as she sat alone in the lab reviewing the footage, one final time Dr. Carter allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The screen glowed softly before her, casting shadows on the walls. For all the uncertainty and controversy, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, for John's courage, for her team's dedication, and for the boundless curiosity that drove humanity forward. In the end, the experiment didn't solve the mystery of life after death. Instead, it illuminated something equally profound: the enduring power of wonder. Whether the footage captured residual energy, spiritual presence, or simply the interplay of natural forces, it reminded the world of one undeniable truth: that the boundary between life and death was far blurrier than anyone had imagined. And as long as humans dared to ask questions, that threshold would remain a source of endless fascination, hope, and discovery.